They grew up side by side in the same cramped neighborhood, where cracked sidewalks whispered stories of struggle and dreams felt like distant echoes. Whoa. Two boys, Ion and Rehan, running barefoot through dusty alleys, sharing scraps of laughter, but carrying very different shadows in their hearts. Years passed. The world changed around them, but the weight of their upbringing clung tight. Now, Ion walks with quiet confidence, a calm investor who seems to move through life with an almost effortless ease. His eyes hold a steady light as if he's learned to play a game most never even realize is happening. Rehan, on the other hand, wears the lines of worry like armor. Despite pulling in more money than most around him, he feels trapped in a cycle of anxiety and scarcity. His nights stretch long, haunted by the gnawing question, why does it feel like no matter how hard I work, I'm always one step behind? The world sees only the surface, a man earning well but perpetually restless. But beneath it all, a hidden war rages. A battle not of numbers or bank balances, but of two conflicting mindsets locked inside his brain. How is it possible that two men, sharing roots, living parallel lives, can find themselves worlds apart in fortune and peace? What invisible force separates the investor who grows and the struggler who shrinks? This isn't just a story about money. It's a journey deep inside the human mind, where fear and possibility collide. The double life of abundance and scarcity plays out not in the streets, but in the quiet recesses of thought, shaping destiny one belief at a time. And this battle, it's only just begun. Rehan watches Ion from a distance, caught between admiration and suspicion. To him, Ion's steady rise feels like a mystery wrapped in luck, or worse, something unfair. How can one man slip through the cracks and find calm when the rest of them are drowning in noise? He's convinced there's some secret game Ion is playing, maybe bending the rules or cheating the system in subtle ways. It's easier to believe that than to face the uncomfortable truth. One evening, sitting across from each other under the dim glow of a street lamp, Ion leans in and says something that cuts through the noise. It's not about the money, Rehan. It's about what's happening inside your mind. Rehan laughs, sharp and bitter, almost like a defense mechanism. He shakes his head, unwilling to entertain an idea that sounds too simple, or worse, too hard. Mindset. How can thoughts and feelings hold that kind of power over real life? Over the bills and the debts? But as days go by, cracks start to appear in Rehan's world. His carefully constructed certainty begins to tremble. The more he clings to old beliefs about luck and the way things are, the more he feels the ground slipping beneath his feet. Ion's words echo again and again. The enemy isn't outside, it's inside. It's the stories we tell ourselves. About scarcity, about fear, about never having enough. Rehan's laughter fades into silence, replaced by a creeping doubt and a growing fear that maybe, just maybe, the battle he's fighting isn't against the world, but against his own mind. The roots of their struggles stretch far back, tangled in memories of childhood where every whispered word shaped the men they were becoming. Rehan often found himself haunted by the voice of his mother, a voice wrapped in worry and urgency, etched deep into his bones. Save everything. You can't afford mistakes. People like us don't get second chances. That phrase was more than advice. It was a warning, a mantra, a code written into the fabric of his upbringing. Every penny counted, every risk was a threat. In Rehan's world, abundance wasn't just rare, it was dangerous. To hope was to invite failure. To spend was to gamble with survival. On the other side, Ion's path was shaped by a different voice, one that challenged fear rather than embraced it. His mentor, an older man who had seen both ruin and redemption, hammered a lesson into his mind that would define him forever. If you only protect what you have, you'll never grow. This wasn't reckless optimism. It was a deliberate choice to see the world not as a cage, but as a garden, one where seeds had to be planted, nurtured, and sometimes risked to bloom. Same streets, same broken windows, same worn-out shoes. But two boys growing into men who carried radically different belief systems. Like invisible weights anchored to their souls, Rehan's scarcity mindset whispered constantly, tightening its grip with every setback. The voice inside told him to clutch tighter, to prepare for famine, to fear loss above all else. It was a silent curse, a shadow stalking his every decision, whispering that he was never enough. Never ready, never safe. Ion's abundance mindset didn't deny hardship, it faced it squarely, understanding that growth was born from discomfort. The same fear that froze Rehan in place became fuel for Ion's forward motion. He learned to trust possibility even when the future looked uncertain, to lean into discomfort rather than run from it. What neither of them fully realized yet was that these early scripts were more than just thoughts. They were the very blueprint of their futures, encoded deep in their brains, shaping every financial decision, every risk, every dream deferred or pursued. In the quiet moments when the city slept, Rehan's mind replayed his mother's words like a broken record. Binding him in chains he could neither see nor break. Meanwhile, Ion's mentor's voice echoed like a steady drumbeat, calling him to step beyond fear into something greater. The invisible line between these two worlds was drawn long ago in lullabies, in harsh words, in the weight of survival. And until they could rewrite those stories, their lives would keep spinning in the same endless loop, one of anxiety and scarcity, the other of hope and growth. The seeds of their financial fates were sown long before the first paycheck, deep in the quiet shadows of childhood, in moments so ordinary yet so powerful, they would echo for a lifetime. For Rehan, those moments came wrapped in the voice of his mother. It's a woman shaped by hardship, whose love was fierce but laced with fear. "Save everything," she would say, her eyes scanning the small room as if scarcity itself was lurking in the corners. "People like us don't get second chances. We can't afford mistakes." Her words weren't just advice, they were a lifeline, a shield against a world that had been cruel and unforgiving. To slip up meant risking everything. Spend recklessly was to invite disaster. In Rehan's mind, these warnings grew into rigid rules etched on invisible walls. Money was safety. Loss was danger. The future was a fragile thing to be guarded at all costs. Every decision was a test of survival. Every dollar saved a small victory over the relentless threat of poverty. He learned to clutch tightly, too, calculate every move, and to fear any step that might lead to loss. But beneath this fortress of caution, something else took root, a silent, knowing voice that whispered he would never be enough, that no matter how hard he worked or how much he saved, the well of scarcity would never run dry. That abundance was a dream for other men, not for boys like him. Meanwhile, just blocks away, Ion's story was being written by a different voice, one that challenged the fear and doubt, inviting him to see the world through a lens of possibility. His mentor, a man weathered by his own battles, but unbroken in spirit, taught him a lesson that would become the cornerstone of his life. If you only protect what you have, you'll never grow. This was not reckless bravado or blind hope. It was a deliberate decision to step beyond fear, to invest in himself even when the outcome was uncertain. To see money not as a scarce resource to be hoarded, but as a tool, a seed that needed planting, watering, and the courage to risk failure. Their worlds were built on the same cracked foundation, the same streets worn thin by struggle, same silent prayers whispered in the dark, but the architecture of their beliefs could not have been more different. Where Rehan saw a cage, Ion saw a garden waiting to bloom. For Rehan, scarcity mindset was a prison crafted not by chains but by stories. Stories of lack, limitation, and the cruel necessity of survival. These stories shaped his decisions, guiding him to save obsessively, avoid risks, and guard every penny as if his life depended on it. Yet beneath this careful vigilance was a well of anxiety that never ceased, a storm that no amount of money could calm. Ion's abundance mindset didn't deny hardship or pain. Instead, it embraced them as necessary parts of growth. The same fears that paralyzed Rehan became fuel for Ion's journey, a call to move forward, to take calculated risks, to trust in his ability to create opportunity, even in uncertainty. The differences between them were not about intelligence or talent, but about the invisible programming written deep within their brains, programming that shaped every financial choice, every dream deferred, every chance taken or missed. Late at night, when the city fell silent, Rihan's thoughts turned inward, replaying his mother's warnings with a relentless echo, tightening the invisible chains around his spirit. He wrestled with a fear that abundance was impossible for someone like him, a man who had been taught to expect hardship. Ion, by contrast, carried his mentor's voice like a steady drumbeat, a rhythmic call to rise above fear and scarcity, to embrace a different story, one of possibility, growth, resilience. Neither man fully understood it yet, but their lives were shaped by these early beliefs, beliefs that would either hold them captive or set them free. Until they could rewrite the stories of scarcity and abundance in their minds, they were destined to live in two separate worlds, divided not by circumstance, but by the invisible lines drawn in childhood. This silent war between fear and hope, between holding on and letting go, was just beginning, and it would decide everything. The weight of failure settled heavily on Rihan's shoulders, like a relentless storm that refused to pass. His world, once carefully constructed with rules and safeguards, has begun to crumble, exposing raw nerves and unspoken fears. Every late night spent staring at dwindling bank balances, every anxious call to creditors, every sleepless hour gnawed at the core of his pride, and yet, through it all, Ion's calm presence felt like a distant echo, a reminder of a different path. One Rihan stubbornly refused to take. In a moment thick with desperation, Rihan's frustration boiled over. He confronted Ion with sharp words, bitterness seeping into every syllable. "You never helped me," he accused, eyes burning with a mixture of pain and resentment. "You always had your own way, your luck, your mindset, while I was left." To fight alone, it wasn't just a plea for aid. It was an eruption of years of doubt, envy, and unspoken pain. To Rihan, Ion's success felt like a betrayal, proof that the system was rigged, and that friendship wasn't enough to bridge the gap between them. Ion met Rihan's gaze steadily, a calm flame burning behind his eyes. Without anger, without judgment, he spoke the truth that Rihan wasn't ready to hear. "I never promised to fix your problems. You don't need my help, Rihan. What you need is to stop believing the world is against you." The words landed like a cold wave, shocking. In their clarity and brutal, in their honesty. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Rihan's mind raced. Was this compassion or cruelty disguised as wisdom? It felt like betrayal, a rejection from the one person who should have stood by him, unable to bear. The weight of that truth, Rihan turned away, his heart heavy with a storm of emotions, anger, shame, confusion, and a flicker of something darker, doubt. He walked into the night, the city's hum swallowing his footsteps. Inside him, the battle raged fiercer than ever. Could he let go of the stories that had kept him trapped? Could he face the terrifying possibility that the enemy wasn't outside, but deep within his own mind? The rift between them wasn't just about money or success. It was a crossroads where pain met possibility, where old beliefs clashed with the promise of change. In that moment, Rihan felt the fragile walls of his world crack, leaving him exposed, vulnerable, lost, but perhaps just maybe on the brink of something new. The nights grew darker for Rihan, each one heavier than the last. The crushing weight of failure pressed on his chest, suffocating every breath. The world he'd built with painstaking caution had shattered, leaving behind only shards of doubt and despair. His phone remained silent more often than not, and even the faces of old friends blurred into shadows of distance. He was alone, not just in the physical sense, but in the hollow echo chamber of his own mind, in the depths of this loneliness. As the city slept under a blanket of indifferent stars, Rihan stumbled upon something unexpected. A worn leather-bound journal, buried deep within a forgotten drawer, a relic from Ion's past. His fingers hesitated before opening it, the pages fragile, filled with handwriting raw and uneven. It was a secret map to a journey he never knew Ion had taken, a journey lined with doubt, debt, and moments that mirrored his own struggles. The journal revealed late nights spent wrestling with fear, days when hope flickered faintly, nearly extinguished by relentless setbacks. Here was Ion, stripped bare and unguarded. Not the calm investor who seemed to glide effortlessly through life, but a man who had stumbled, faltered, and fought tooth and nail against the same demons that now haunted Rihan. Each page was a confession, a testament to battles fought in silence. Battles against the voices that whispered, "You're not enough. You will fail and give up now." The words were a mirror, reflecting Rihan's own pain back at him, but with a crucial difference. Ion never allowed those voices to define him. He refused to think like a victim. Instead, Ion had made a choice to see beyond fear, to rewrite his story one fragile step at a time. He had faced the same storm, but he had learned to dance in the rain instead of waiting for the sun. For the first time in a long while, Rihan felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The realization that the man he had envied and resented was not a stranger blessed by fortune, but a brother who had walked through hell and emerged scarred but unbroken. The journal wasn't just pages of ink and paper. It was a lifeline, a silent invitation to choose differently, to break free from the chains of scarcity woven deep in their shared past. In that quiet room, bathed in the pale glow of a street lamp filtering through the window, Rihan's world shifted ever so slightly. The battle wasn't lost yet. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment where the story could change, where fear could be met with courage, and scarcity could give way to abundance. But the path ahead was still uncertain, and the hardest work was yet to come. The air felt different now, heavier, yes, but also charged with a strange kind of possibility. After the long, dark nights when doubt had ruled, Rihan found himself standing on the edge of a new chapter. The worn journal in his hands was more than just a collection of words. It was a spark in the void, a fragile ember flickering against the shadows of fear. It began with small acts, almost invisible to the world, but seismic within. For the first time in years, Rihan whispered a quiet yes to uncertainty, a yes to small risks, investing time in a course he'd been too afraid to try. Speaking up in meetings when silence had been his shield, allowing himself to dream of more than just survival. He started tracking more than just dollars, tracked thoughts, emotions, the patterns running beneath the surface. The silent stories of scarcity that still whispered in the corners of his mind. Journaling became his secret weapon, each entry a confrontation with fear and a declaration of intention. Today, I will not let scarcity define me. I will breathe through the discomfort. Letting go was the hardest part. Control had been his fortress for so long, a false sense of safety built on rigidity and fear. But step by step, Rihan learned to loosen his grip, to trust that not everything needed to be perfect, that failure wasn't a trap, but a teacher. He stumbled, yes, but each fall was a lesson, each misstep a nudge toward something greater. The weight on his chest lightened, just a little. Breathing felt less like a chore and more like a reclaiming of space. Space to grow, to hope, to imagine. He wasn't healed yet. The scars of scarcity still ached beneath the surface, but for the first time, they didn't define him. Around him, the world didn't change overnight. Bills still came. The pressures remained. But Rihan's relationship with those pressures shifted. He saw opportunities where before there had been walls. He recognized fear as a signal, not a sentence. And slowly, imperceptibly, the hidden battle inside his brain began to tilt. There were moments of doubt, moments when the old stories called out with the familiar voice of despair. But now, Rihan had a new response, a flicker of defiance born from understanding. I am more than my fears. I am more than my scarcity. This was no grand transformation, no overnight miracle. It was a slow, grinding reclaiming of self, the quiet revolution of a man who chose day by day, step into the light despite the shadows. And though the road ahead was long and uncertain, for the first time in a long time, Rayhan felt something. He had almost forgotten. Hope. Just as the first rays of hope began to seep through the cracks of Rayhan's guarded heart, the world tested him once more. The steady steps he had taken toward change were met with a familiar siren call, a temptation wrapped in security and promise. But shadowed by the very scarcity he was striving to escape, a job offer arrived. Not just any offer, but a position. That promised stability, a high salary, and the kind of steady paycheck that could quiet the storm raging inside his mind. On paper, it was everything a man like Rayhan had been told to chase: safety, certainty, and freedom from financial fear. But beneath the surface, the offer felt like a cage. It's a kind of cage built not from bars, but from compromise. A gilded prison where dreams wither and spirits dull. The job was soulless, an endless repetition of tasks that drained purpose rather than fueled passion. It was the embodiment of the scarcity mindset's promise: play it safe, avoid risk, survive at all costs. Rayhan stared at the offer, his heart caught in a war between the comfort of familiarity and the call of something greater. The raw, terrifying potential of building his own path. He could feel the old voices creeping in, whispering, "Take the safe route. Don't rock the boat. You're not ready for more." The temptation was powerful, almost seductive in its simplicity. To accept was to put on armor once again, to step back into the shadows where fear ruled and growth stalled. It was the easy choice, the choice that had kept him stuck for so long, but something inside him hesitated. Flicker of resistance, fragile but fierce. In the stillness of that moment, Rayhan faced the mirror, not just the reflection staring back, but the man he was becoming. The man who had started to say yes to risk, who had begun to see beyond scarcity, who dared to imagine a future defined not by fear, but by possibility. The job offer was more than an opportunity. It was a test, a crossroads where the old and new versions of himself collided. Would he choose the comfort of certainty, even if it meant trading away his freedom? Or would he dare to walk the uncertain path, embracing risk as a companion rather than an enemy? The answer was not easy. The pull of the scarcity mindset was strong, its grip reinforced by years of conditioning and pain. But in that crucible of choice, Rayhan glimpsed something precious: the chance to reclaim his life on his own terms. And though the road ahead was shadowed with unknowns, the hesitation was a spark, a signal that the battle inside his brain was far from over, but that victory was no longer out of reach. The silence of the room was heavy, filled with a stillness that demanded reckoning. Rayhan stood before the mirror, his reflection a blurred mosaic of every doubt, every fear, every unspoken hope he had carried for so long. The man staring back at him was familiar, yet strange, a composite of past scars and emerging strength. For years, Rayhan had believed that his greatest enemy was poverty, the absence of money, the sting of scarcity. He thought fear of being poor had shackled him, dictated every choice, every hesitation. But in that quiet, unguarded moment, a revelation unfolded with the weight of 1,000 truths. He wasn't afraid of being poor. He was afraid of something far deeper. The terrifying prospect of believing he could be more and then being wrong. The thought hit him like a thunderclap, reverberating through every fiber of his being. All the years of clawing and scrimping, all the nights spent wrestling with anxiety, were not just about money. They were about self-worth, about the question he had never dared to ask himself aloud: am I enough? Do I deserve abundance? Or is it a luxury reserved for others? This was the hidden battle, not between scarcity and abundance in the world, but between belief and doubt. Within himself, he realized that the scarcity mindset was less about external conditions and more about an internal story he had been telling for decades. A story of limitation, fear, and survival. The abundance mindset was not a promise of wealth or success, but a radical act of self-acceptance, a decision to believe in his own potential, regardless of the outcome. Rayhan's hands trembled slightly as he reached out, touching the cold glass. The man in the mirror seemed to nod back, an unspoken pact passing between them, a promise to face the fears that had held him captive, and to step into the unknown with courage. This was the twist he hadn't seen coming. The enemy was not outside, waiting to strike. It was inside, woven into the fabric of his identity, and only by confronting it could he hope to break free. The journey ahead was daunting, but the shackles were starting to fall away. For the first time, Rehan understood that abundance wasn't a place to reach or a destination to arrive at. It was a choice, a decision made in the quiet moments when no one was watching, and in that choice lay freedom. The moment had arrived. The crossroads where every step Rehan had taken converged into a single, defining choice. The city outside pulsed with life, indifferent to the storm of transformation raging within him. In the quiet of his room, beneath the dim glow of a fading lamp, Rehan stood alone, yet unshackled for the first time. He looked again at the offer that had promised security, a steady paycheck, a chance to escape uncertainty. It was everything the old Rehan had dreamed of: stability, comfort, safety. But the man he had become knew it was not freedom. It was a gilded cage, a fortress built from the fear he had spent so long trying to outrun. Turning away from the paper, Rehan felt a surge of clarity. This was not a rejection born of pride or rebellion. It was a conscious decision, a declaration that his life would no longer be dictated by fear or scarcity. He chose to build something of his own. It wasn't a grand empire or a guaranteed path to wealth. It was a vision, fragile and raw, fueled by newfound courage and the willingness to face the unknown. Every brick laid with intention, every risk taken with respect for the possibility of failure and growth. Rehan was not rich, not yet. The road ahead was winding, steep, and filled with uncertainty. But for the first time, he felt free. Freedom from the chains of old stories. Freedom from the invisible prison of not enough. Freedom to define success on his own terms, guided by purpose rather than fear. In that freedom, abundance revealed itself not as a number in a bank account, but as a state of being. A mindset that refused to be limited by past wounds or external circumstances. A quiet power that comes from believing in oneself, from daring to step into the light even when shadows linger. Rehan's journey was far from over. The battle inside. His brain would return, as it always does, testing resolve and courage. But now he carried a new truth. Abundance isn't a destination to arrive at, but a decision to live by. And in that decision lay his greatest wealth. The hidden battle had not vanished, but it had been transformed. Scarcity and abundance were no longer enemies in the world outside, but choices in the world within. And Rehan was ready to fight for the life he deserved. The battle was never about money. It was about choosing to believe in himself. And in that belief, Rehan found his true freedom.